The room was filled with quiet laughter as the woman walked in. Her clothes were plain, her shoes a little worn, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her file. She had spent the entire night preparing for this interview, hoping for just a chance, one opportunity to prove herself. But the moment she stepped through the glass doors of the fancy corporate office, every pair of eyes turned to her with judgment. The receptionist glanced her up and down, whispering something to her colleague before forcing a polite smile. The other candidates, dressed in sharp suits, exchanged smirks as if she didn't belong there. Still, she took a deep breath and sat quietly, reminding herself that hard work mattered more than appearance. When her name was finally called, she stood up straight and entered the interview room. But before she could even finish introducing herself, one of the interviewers chuckled, questioning whether she had mistaken the building for a charity office. Another asked if she could even handle basic professionalism. The words stung, but she didn't respond. She simply gathered her papers, thanked them softly, and walked out, her eyes glistening, her dignity intact. What they didn't know was that this simple woman wasn't just anyone. Behind her calm eyes was a story none of them could imagine. And the man waiting for her downstairs, the one who had encouraged her to go after her dreams, wasn't just her husband. He was the CEO of the very company whose staff had just mocked and humiliated her. But what happened when he found out how they treated her would change everything. Because sometimes, the most ordinary-looking person in the room holds the most extraordinary power, and they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. As she stepped out of the building, the cool air brushed against her face, but it did little to calm the storm inside her. She felt embarrassed, not because of what they said, but because she had believed this company might see beyond appearances. Her husband, Armin, had dropped her off earlier with a reassuring smile. He hadn't told her much about the place, only that he knew someone who could get her an interview. She didn't want special treatment, so she'd prepared on her own, determined to earn the position fairly. Now, as she stood outside the glass tower, she couldn't help but wonder if she'd made a mistake. Inside, the panel of interviewers continued their chatter. One of them joked about her outdated resume, while another laughed at her simple clothes. None of them realized that the woman they had just dismissed so carelessly had walked out of that room with far more grace than any of them had shown. Downstairs, Armin was sitting in the car, scrolling through some files when he saw her coming. One look at her face, and he knew something was wrong. She tried to hide it, forcing a smile, but he noticed the tremble in her voice when she said, "It didn't go well." He didn't press her immediately. Instead, he gently asked her what happened as they drove away. With each word she shared, his expression grew still. He had always believed in treating every employee with respect, no matter their background. The idea that people in his own company could behave so heartlessly shook him deeply. But he didn't show his anger. Not yet. He simply nodded, letting her finish. Then, quietly, he said, "I think it's time I pay them a visit," without warning. The next morning, the office buzzed with its usual rhythm, phones ringing, keyboards clattering, and employees hurrying through the corridors, unaware of the storm heading their way. The HR manager, the same one who had mocked the woman, was busy gossiping about the funny interview from the previous day. "She looked like she came from a village fair," he said, laughing as the others joined in. None of them noticed the black car that had just pulled into the company's private parking area. Armin stepped out quietly, wearing his usual calm expression. Everyone in the company knew the CEO was returning from a business trip that week, but they hadn't expected him this early or unannounced. He walked through the reception area, observing every small detail, the forced smiles, the stiff greetings, the nervous glances. The same receptionist who had looked down on his wife the day before now straightened her posture, her tone suddenly polite. Armin didn't say much. He simply nodded and asked for the list of candidates interviewed yesterday. Meanwhile, his wife, Mira, sat at home replaying everything in her mind. She wasn't angry, just disappointed. She had hoped to prove herself, not through her husband's name, but through her own effort. Yet, she couldn't stop thinking about how casually they had treated her. She didn't know that Armin was already at the office, quietly piecing together what had happened. In the HR room, whispers began to spread that the CEO was asking questions about yesterday's interviews. The panel members started to feel uneasy, sensing that something wasn't right. One of them laughed nervously, brushing it off as a coincidence. But when Armin appeared at the door, expression unreadable, the room fell silent. No one knew the truth yet, but they were about to. The moment Armin stepped into the room, every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The interviewers, who had been laughing so freely the day before, now sat frozen, eyes wide and nervous smiles plastered across their faces. He greeted them politely, his tone calm but carrying a quiet authority that filled the space. He asked them to walk him through the interviews from yesterday, each candidate, each decision, and their reasoning. No one dared to meet his eyes. The HR manager fumbled through his notes, his voice trembling slightly as he mentioned Mira's name. Armin nodded slowly, pretending not to know who she was. "So, what made you reject her?" he asked softly. The question was simple, but the room felt heavier with each passing second. One interviewer finally spoke up, saying her appearance didn't match the company's image. Another admitted she didn't seem confident enough. Armin listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair, letting a moment of quiet stretch uncomfortably long. "Interesting," he said at last. "Tell me, how much value do you place on kindness and respect when you represent this company?" No one answered. The HR manager shifted uneasily, realizing this was not a casual conversation anymore. Outside, whispers began to spread across departments that the CEO was questioning the interview panel directly. People peeked through the glass windows, trying to catch a glimpse. Inside, Armin slowly opened a folder he had brought with him. It contained a photo, one taken that very morning, of Mira standing beside him, smiling as they left their house together. He placed it on the table without a word. The color drained from their faces as recognition sank in. The silence that followed was so deep, it felt like the entire office had stopped breathing. The room remained painfully silent as the photo sat on the table like a secret too heavy to hide. Every eye darted between Armin's calm face and the picture of Mira. The realization hit hard. The woman they had mocked and dismissed so easily was the CEO's wife. The HR manager stammered, trying to explain, but his voice cracked. Armin didn't raise his voice or show anger. His quiet tone was far more unsettling. "So, this is how you treat people who come here looking for an opportunity?" he asked softly. "I wonder how many others you've humiliated the same way." Before anyone could respond, his assistant entered the room, carrying a file. She whispered something in Armin's ear, and his expression shifted slightly. He opened the folder and flipped through the papers. "It seems," he said slowly, "that some of these interview reports were altered after submission." The panel members exchanged confused glances. "Someone," Armin continued, "has been changing scores and comments to favor certain applicants, people connected to employees here." The tension thickened instantly. The HR manager turned pale, realizing this was no longer just about Mira. It was about corruption inside the company. Armin's eyes moved from one face to another. "This isn't just disrespect," he said quietly. "It's dishonesty, and it runs deeper than I thought." The employees outside could sense something serious was unfolding. Whispers spread like wildfire through the halls. Mira, still unaware of the growing chaos, received a call from Armin's assistant, asking her to come to the office immediately. She hesitated, unsure if she should face those who had insulted her. But something in her heart told her this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the truth, and it was about to come out in a way no one expected. The elevator doors opened, and Mira stepped out slowly, her heart pounding. The same employees who had mocked her before now lowered their eyes as she passed. Some whispered apologies under their breath, but she said nothing. She only wanted to know why Armin had called her back. When she entered the meeting room, every face turned toward her in uneasy silence. Armin stood near the window, his expression calm but firm. "Mira," he said gently, "I wanted them to meet you again properly this time." Her eyes met the interviewers. None of them could hold her gaze. The HR manager mumbled something about a misunderstanding, but Armin stopped him. "A misunderstanding?" he repeated quietly. "You didn't just insult my wife. You insulted every person who walks through these doors hoping for a fair chance." He paused, then placed another document on the table, evidence of the falsified reports. "This company was built on honesty and respect. If you can't uphold that, you don't belong here." His words were calm, but the message was final. Then came the unexpected twist. Mira took a deep breath and spoke softly. Armin, let them stay. Everyone turned to her in shock. They made a mistake, she continued. But firing them won't change the culture. What will change it is giving people like me, those who don't look perfect on paper, a real chance. Her voice was steady, full of quiet strength. Armin looked at her for a long moment before nodding. Then you'll help lead that change, he said. He turned to the panel. Meet your new HR consultant. The room fell silent again, but this time it was out of respect. Mira smiled, not out of pride, but peace. The simple woman they had once mocked was now the reason their company would never see people the same way again. In the weeks that followed, the entire company began to change. Mira started working closely with the HR team, not to punish them, but to teach them what true professionalism meant. She introduced new hiring policies focused on skills, empathy, and integrity rather than appearances. The same employees who once looked down on her now listened carefully during her meetings, realizing how much they had to learn. Her calm nature and genuine kindness began to shift the work culture from one of judgment to one of respect. Armin watched quietly from a distance, proud of how she handled everything with such grace. He had always known her strength, but seeing her lead with compassion rather than anger made him admire her even more. The employees, too, started to see her differently. Some even came forward to apologize personally, admitting they had been wrong to judge her by her looks. Mira accepted every apology with the same gentle smile, reminding them that everyone deserves a second chance. Months later, the company became known not just for its success, but for its fairness. Candidates from all walks of life came to interviews without fear of being judged, and many spoke of how inspiring Mira's story was. She never sought attention for it. She just wanted people to understand that true worth doesn't always wear expensive clothes or speak perfect English. On her way home one evening, she looked out the car window at the company logo shining in the sunset and smiled. What had started as a day of humiliation had turned into a journey of hope and transformation. The world had mocked a simple woman once, but she proved that dignity, kindness, and courage could turn even the harshest judgment into lasting change.